You may have tuned in today looking for another writing live stream for November. You may have seen on my page that we have had to reschedule the talk with Liz Hand, and so that will be coming probably early next year. In the absence of that, rather than me rambling about writing by myself, which could be entertaining or could just be ridiculous, I figured I would share a story with everybody for November. It's getting colder, at least up in New England, where I am, where we had a brief heat wave of sorts, and now like fall is actually catching up with us. So we're indoors, um, and I figured stories were always fun, and I like sharing them. I have one today, and I believe I've shared part of this story at least before with people, but I don't know if I've ever read the whole thing in a public setting. And being just me and I'm completely in charge, I can set whatever time limits I want. And I promise it still is not a terribly long story, just a little bit more than I normally read. So I will share that, and then I'll keep an eye on the comments. If anyone is tuning in, thank you, you're awesome, and feel free to drop a comment there. Otherwise, this will be up live, not live, posted after the fact and available for viewing. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's going to be pretty low key today. We will be back next month with another writing talk and hopefully getting back on schedule as much as 2020 and pandemics and all such things allow because it has been a year. I think we can all agree on that. But yeah, I will get to it. So, this is a story called The Shadow Weaver Dwells in Darkness. And it is a sort of prequel story to a much longer project that I'm working on that will someday be available, theoretically. Um, but yeah, so I don't think there's a whole lot of setup needed, and I will take it away from there. Hyverion the Shadow Weaver sits in darkness. He has not moved in hours, and those that serve in his house know better than to disturb him. See the way he sits on the throne he carved for himself from the heart of the mountain. See his fingers laced beneath his chin, his unblinking eyes fixed on the wooden table that stands before him. See the creases on his brow and the streaks on his face from tears that have ceased to fall. Hyverion is surrounded by wonders he has gathered, won, created, but now these things are forgotten in the shadows. The gilded scrollwork, the cases holding aging tomes, the gold trophies and marks of honor. These are meaningless. All that matters is the table, and the object which lies upon it. On the corner of the table sits a bowl of clay. The bowl is full of water and contains a single shard of stone. The stone glows with white light, and it is by this light that Hyverion watches the object on the table. For truly, it is just an object now. It is flesh and bone, blood and sinew, but it is devoid of life. And without life, without spirit, it is nothing but an empty vessel. But once, not long ago, this thing without life was Hyverion's daughter. And though the Shadow Weaver knows that this is the natural order of things, knows that the object on the table is his child no longer, he cannot look away. The form that once belonged to his little girl is covered in a golden shroud which reveals only the vaguest shape of the figure beneath. For all his power, all his wealth, all his influence, knowledge, and experience, Hyverion still finds himself sitting alone in the dark, looking at the empty form of one he loved. And to him, this is not right. Though he would, he cannot give anything he possesses to restore life to her body, except, perhaps, his own soul. It is this question, more than any other, that the Shadow Weaver contemplates as he sits alone in darkness, alone but for the faint ripple of shadow in the corner behind him. The ripple does not move, and Hyverion pays it no mind. It waits, watching, listening. The knock at the door disrupts the Shadow Weaver's thoughts. The sound is quiet, knuckles on cold stone, but it seems loud in the utter silence of the chamber. Hyverion does not answer, but he does not need to. There is only one person who would come to him now. The steward of Hyverion's house is a woman named Kali. She began by serving Hyverion's grandmother 50 years earlier. Now, having proven herself faithful, there are very few people to whom she answers. Rion, she calls him, the name Hyverion's mother used to call him. The Lady Sadia is inquiring after you. Kali's voice is low, solemn. She is interrupting, and she knows this. But in her the interruption is permitted, and so she must carry out the task that others cannot. When Hyverion does not answer, does not so much as lift his eyes to acknowledge her, Kali comes closer, positioning herself to the right of the Shadow Weaver's throne. The ripple of shadow still does not move. She wishes to see her daughter, Kali says, interceding. She wishes for you to join in the ceremony of mourning. She has burned offerings to Mair and Pitu, but you both must make the final offering to Tamsin. The dragon cannot have her yet. These are the first words Hyverion has spoken in... How long has he been here? Has it been hours? Days? He does not know. His throat is dry and the words cause him pain, as is fitting. She died in pain. It is right that he should have to share in it, if only a fraction. Kali lowers herself to her knees at Hyverion's side and places a hand upon his arm. I know your grief, she tells him. I have burned 3 children and said the prayers to guide them along Tamsin's road. You know this. There are some things that are beyond the power of even the mighty Shadow Weaver. It is not weakness to accept such truths. It is strength to persevere in spite of them. But are they truths? Asks Hyverion. Still he does not move. Still he does not lower his eyes from the form on the table. Must we accept them? A crease furrows Kali's brow. She draws back, just a little, the better to see Hyverion's face. What she sees there deepens her frown further. Death is as constant as birth. To challenge it, to challenge Tamsin himself, can bring only pain. It is impossible that I could feel more pain than this. The tears Hyverion had believed exhausted begin to fall once more. It is always possible to bring about more pain, Kali tells him, for yourself or for others. To forget this is to risk ruin. She cups a hand around Hyverion's cheek and turns his tear-streaked face toward her. Say the words, she urges him. Let her walk Tamsin's road and find rest. Let her go. Hyverion's eyes close, and a shiver runs through his body as he allows himself to move from the position he has held for so long. Exhaustion weighs on him, clinging to his muscles as sorrow clings to his heart. Tell my wife I will see her, he says. Kali nods and rises. Before she departs, she leans down to press her forehead against Hyverion's. He does not open his eyes as they share warmth, share strength, share a brief moment of contact there in the darkness. And then Kali departs, retracing her steps down the room and out of the door as noiselessly as she arrived. See the Shadow Weaver slump in his chair as his steward departs. The room is silent save for the whisper of Hyverion's breathing. It is the silence of death. The air is chill, separated by so much rock from the beating suns outside. Though it is now a death room, this was once a grand hall. A long table sits between stone pillars which run the length of the chamber. The table is set for a banquet. There is no food but the golden goblets and plates, bowls and knives and unlit candles. Desert flowers in vases are drooping away, dropping their dead petals onto the tabletop. Hyverion has forbidden anyone from entering the room, and so the dishes remain where they are. Master. The ripple of shadow removes itself from the corner. It is shaped, roughly, like a man, though its form is difficult to focus on. It is the flash of movement at the corner of your eye, living darkness given form. The creature's voice is a hiss, like wind in a crevice echoing across a great expanse. Master, it says, time is running short. All is prepared, but your decision must be made. Izan. Hyverion raises his eyes to the shadow creature he shaped with his own hands, which he named and summoned into being. I do not know what to do. The Shadow Weaver's voice breaks, but he swallows the tears that seek to fall. This is a time for choices, not mourning. Izan hesitates, not drawing closer, not offering any overture of comfort. I cannot guide you, it says. There is none who can make this choice but you. I know this. Hyverion looks again upon his daughter's form, but still the question remains. I think. Izan's words are cut off by the opening of the door. The woman who enters the room brings light with her. The lantern is small, filled with water and shining white from the shard of stone contained within. Dressed in flowing robes of darkest blue, the Lady Sadia walks the length of the hall with controlled steps that echo off the surrounding stone. She holds herself tall, firm, composing herself with years of practice and bearing. She fixes her eyes on Hyverion. The Shadow Weaver is motionless as he watches her approach. It is only when Sadia reaches the end of the banquet table that her composure weakens. She sets the lantern aside, and her eyes move from her husband to the shrouded form between them. The lady allows herself one shuddering breath, one touch of the pendant that hangs at her neck, before she crosses the remaining distance to stand before the throne. Leave us, she says, not turning her focus to Izan. Her voice is cracked, but hard. The creature of shadow lingers, waiting for the moment when Hyverion waves his hand. Then it bows and fades away like smoke on the wind. In its absence, Sadia kneels before her husband, takes his hand in hers, looks up into his face as her eyes shimmer with tears. But his eyes are closed to her. His mind is far away, chasing after the spirit of his daughter. Please, will you look at me? Sadia asks. She squeezes his hands, seeking his reassuring grip in return. You have lingered here long enough. How can I not linger? Hyverion whispers, when this may be the last moment I have with her. Waiting here will not bring her back. Sadia runs a hand along her husband's cheek. Nothing will bring her back, but we can help her on her journey. We can say goodbye in the proper way. I am not ready. Sadia begins to cry. Do you think that I am? Do you believe that I am so easily made my peace with this? If we linger here too long, there is more we may still lose. People and responsibilities entrusted to us. The entirety of the Dominion looks to you for guidance. Hyverion's voice is that of a broken man, weighted with stone and darkness. The Dominion means nothing to me now. It should, Sadia urges. Thousands of people look to you for strength. The council, the elders, the mystics, all of them pass through our door. They ask for you. They wait for you. Let them wait. The Lady Sadia draws a shuddering breath and turns her husband's gaze to meet her own. And what of me? She asks. Must I also wait? You may forsake your responsibility to those outside these walls, but will you cast me aside with them? I do this for you. For only a moment, the Shadow Weaver's eyes grow clear. They focus on the lady's face, and he traces a single finger along the streak of tears running from her eyes. I do this so that our grief may come to an end. His eyes return to the golden shroud, to the empty vessel that lies beneath. I do this to right a wrong. What are you doing? It is only now, as she listens to her husband's voice, as she studies the lines of his face, that Sadia truly begins to worry. Hyverion has not eaten. He has not slept. For too long he has locked himself away with his grief. You cannot change what has happened, she tells him. Come back with me and offer our blessing, so that she may walk the final road untroubled. No. Hyverion straightens now. He has made his decision, and he steels his will so as not to waver. So young, so innocent, it is not right that his daughter should walk the dragon's road so soon. He will not let her go. What if I knew a way, he asks, a way to call her back to us, a way to bring her home? It does not exist. Hyverion, please come back to me before you stray too far. To think this way is to tempt the ruin of all we know. The Shadow Weaver stands and makes his slow way to the table, to the shroud and the body beneath. His wife does not release his hand. She follows him, clinging to his fingers. I beg of you, she whispers through the tears. Let this idea go. I am sorry. Hyverion turns to her, takes her face in his hands, and presses a kiss to her lips. There is no other way. Please, she begins to say, but Hyverion interrupts her plea. For the first time, his voice is a command. It is cold. It is power. It is the voice of Hyverion, the Shadow Weaver. Izan. The creature of shadow appears behind the Lady Sadia. It puts its hands on either side of her head and draws her backwards. The lady's eyes flutter closed as her hands fall limp from Hyverion's arm. Izan lowers her form to the stone floor, arranging her comfortably where she will lay until she wakes. Hyverion watches, and his resolve holds. Forgive me, he murmurs, though his wife cannot hear. With a few gestures, he takes hold of the darkness of the room and shapes it, weaves it into a cushion that will hold his wife above the cold stone. Then he turns away. Pulling back the shroud, the Shadow Weaver looks on the face of his daughter once more. Her eyes are closed, her skin ashen from disease and time. He can see the emptiness in her, the sickly sweet oils that preserve her, the feel of flesh not flowing with blood. These things betray the loss that has been suffered. But still she is beautiful. Hyverion can see her smile, hear her laughter echoing through these halls of stone. He traces the curve of her jaw, runs a finger over a dark curl of hair. No, this is not right. And of all the people, of all the mystics and elders of the land, it is Hyverion the Shadow Weaver who can make it right. It is time, he says to Izan, and the creature bows its response. Hyverion slips his arms beneath his daughter's form, leaving her still wrapped in the golden shroud. He lifts her from the table and turns toward the back of the chamber, carrying her cradled in his arms as he has done so many times before. Izan takes the lantern from the table, leaving the single bowl of clay to light Sadia's unconscious form. By the time she wakes, Hyverian hopes that all will be well. By the time she wakes, their grief will have ended. At the back of the hall, they pass through a narrow door. Creature, man, and empty vessel. They descend a circular stairway of stone until they emerge into a single room. This is Hyverian's private study, which few have ever seen. It is full of scrolls and tomes, instruments and sketches, jars of liquid and pouches of herbs painstakingly gathered. In the center of the room is a table. Izan has cleared it already, except for a single row of jars, except for a single tattered book. Hyverian lays the form of his daughter upon the table. He folds the shroud down across her chest so that he can see her face, so that he can remember why he is willing to pay the price he fears will be demanded. As though sensing his thoughts, Izan remains close. You do not know what the cost will be, it says. There is much that we do not know. The Shadow Weaver shakes his head. There is always a cost, he answers, and I fear what we do not know as much as what we do. The book that sits on the table is plain, aging parchment bound in a scaled cover. Though older, far older, it appears no different than many other books that line the walls. It was recovered at great risk and contains secrets few have ever imagined. Man and creature alone know of its existence, and even the mighty Shadow Weaver has only begun to decipher the ancient knowledge it contains. Hyverian opens to the page he needs, a page that speaks of life and death and the secret of controlling both. He reads the instructions again, reads the required items, the ancient incantations that will restore what has been lost. Izan opens the jars. They contain simple enough substances, ash and sap, powdered liver and red clay. To the final, empty jar, Hyverian adds his blood, drawn with a knife from above his own heart. Following the faded words in his book, Hyverian works. He mixes ingredients and speaks forbidden words. He works without ceasing, as Izan stands by in silence. While he works, he feels power begin to gather. But it is not his power. It exists somewhere outside of him, outside of even the room in which he stands. It swells beneath the earth and presses down from the sky, growing thicker with every word he speaks. The light from the lantern flickers. Hyverian will not stop now. He cannot. The more the power seeps into the room, the more it moves through him, urging him toward the completion of his task. He murmurs the incantations under his breath, moves around the table even as blood runs from the wound in his chest. He makes marks on the table, traces them on his daughter's dead flesh. He works until the power that surrounds them reaches a breaking point. Standing back from the table, Hyverian the Shadow Weaver utters the final words from the book, and for him they are a prayer. They are a plea to Mair and Pitu, to the dragon Tamsin himself, to give him back his child. And as the final word escapes his lips, the unseen power crashes through them, from every direction and from nowhere at all. Something beyond the realm of sight shatters with a sound that shakes the bones of the world. It echoes in the room like a wave, and leaves Hyverian panting as he leans against the table. Izan remains quiet. The power disperses, fading away like the last rays of the suns at nightfall. Man and creature wait. The first change comes in the form of a breath. It is shallow, silent, But Hyverion does not miss the rise and fall of the girl's chest. It comes again and again. Soon her fingers curl, shifting the shroud as the muscles in her arm begin to move. Then her eyes open. Zarala. Hyverion speaks in a whisper. He cannot believe it. For all he may have hoped, he still cannot believe what he is seeing as his daughter sits up on the table. And now Hyverion's tears are born of joy. She heard him call, and came at the sound, back from the places where the living do not walk. Her eyes, when they turn to him, are dull, clouded and gray. She does not appear to see him as her gaze drifts across the room. Hyverion looks at the color of her flesh, still ashen, and hopes for marks of color returning. But he sees no change. Still her flesh is the pallor of dead things. Her eyes are sunken, and her wasted body appears as it did in the last days of her sickness. And when she turns her face once more toward Hyverion, he sees no recognition there, only a flicker of green flame behind the dead eyes. Zarala, he says again, fear creeping back into his heart. Do you know where you are? The girl rises, slowly, until she is crouching on the table. The shroud falls aside, and the white funereal robe hangs lopsided on her body. The breath that she draws is louder now, but ragged. Those flickering eyes continue to watch Hyverion, but there is nothing human behind the gaze. Master? Asks Izan, breaking its silence for the first time since the ritual began. The girl on the table lunges with a snarl. She throws herself at Hyverion with her mouth open as though to bite him. Zarala! The name is a cry as the Shadow Weaver steps back. Izan snatches the girl from the air. She struggles against it, turning to bite and scratch at the creature that holds her. But Shadow cannot be hurt, and Izan catches her head between its hands. Silence falls as the creature of shadow lowers the unconscious girl to the ground. Hyverion looks down on her with fury welling beside his sorrow. This is not right. He is the Shadow Weaver, the most powerful mystic in the land. He called her back to him and she came. She was supposed to be his little girl, not this monster that now lays at his feet. Something has gone wrong. Something must have gone wrong. Hyverion will study the book again, will try again. He will fix this. He will bring his daughter back. Bind her to the table, he tells Izan, his voice the flat tone of a man near to breaking. See that she does not hurt herself. Izan bows and says nothing. It does not need to speak. It will obey, but man and creature both know the question that hangs in the air. Can such an act be made right? Halfway through binding the unconscious girl, Izan pauses and turns its featureless face toward Hyverion. Something is happening above. What? The Shadow Weaver hears nothing, but Izan is aware of much that is missed by mortal beings. I do not know. In the shadow creature's voice, Hyverion hears a hint of concern, and this worries him, for Izan is a being worried by nothing. Leaving Izan bent over the shape of the thing that should be his daughter, Hyverion ascends the steps back to the hall. It remains dark, table set for banquet, bowl glowing, Sadia laying on the floor. Hyverion pauses in passing to lift his wife from the stone and set her on the table where his daughter's body previously lay. He presses a kiss against her forehead. Forgive me, he says again. In the passage outside the hall, Hyverion finds himself nearly blinded by the brightness. It is day, and the light of the two suns streams from every mirror and window, placed to bring light even here inside the mountain. Hyverion blinks as he adjusts to the world beyond the darkness before striding forward. He is unwashed, disheveled, bleeding, but he does not care. He marches through his halls with purpose. Servants step aside and let him pass with wide eyes and wordless reverence. He strides through the House of Shadow until he reaches the entry hall. Here he finds Kali, speaking with the messenger, who departs moments before Hyverion reaches them. "What is the news?" he asks her. "I am hoping you can tell me," she says, turning dark eyes toward his face, toward the wound in his chest. All throughout the city, people felt a great burst of power. The elders send word that there are rumors circulating, stories of the dead rising in the city. They plead with the Shadow Weaver to investigate. They hope you can find the cause of this horror and set it right. But you already know what has happened, do you not? Hyverion does not answer his steward. If she speaks further, he does not hear. See the Shadow Weaver as he steps through the doorway. Under the light of the two suns, he looks down on the city entrusted to his care. Members of the guard rush past, ready to sacrifice themselves to deal with the pain he has wrought. In the shadow of his home, Hyverion stands without moving. This is not right. It was for him to pay any price, Tamsin demanded. It was for him to bear the cost of calling his daughter back from the final road. But his daughter has not returned, and the price for his efforts may be more than he, or his people, can bear. Hyverion the Shadow Weaver stands in the darkness beneath his door and listens as his city begins to scream. The end. Um, okay, so thank you to anyone who tuned in, or to anyone who comes along later to listen to this. Um, Writing is always so much fun, but writing is often best for an audience, and so I really appreciate anyone who takes the time to listen, to read, anything like that. There is more to come. And I think my final note, just as we're all dealing with 2020 and impending lockdowns and stuff, is please do not put your own interests over the safety of your community. Not that you'll necessarily create the zombie apocalypse, but with the holidays coming, we want everyone to be around for the holidays next year as well. So be safe, listen to scientists, wear a mask, enjoy stories, and everyone enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening. Bye.